But we have Meghann Fahy, who plays Sutton on The Bold Type, the iconic, amazing Sutton. You're acting in this
The
episode.
iconic, oh my gosh, that's the nicest thing someone's ever said about Sutton.
No, Sutton is, I feel like, I love Sutton. I think everyone is such a big fan of Sutton.
That's so sweet. Thank you.
Of course. Okay, everyone, I'm not going to fully spoil, but we'll be talking about the season before we talk about tonight's episode. So first, I just wanted to talk about Sutton's journey on this episode, or this season, especially starting from season 1. And I was thinking about when she was speaking with Jacqueline and saying, you know, how she was an assistant for a really long time, and she was like kind of late to bloom while Kat and Jane were up in their career. So how do you feel about Sutton's like overall professional growth throughout the show?
I mean, it's kind of awesome. I will say, obviously, the show is at times not the most realistic. But one thing that I do get is they're like, man, one of the most realistic things about the show is that it took Sutton 4 years to become a junior stylist. She was an assistant for that long. So I think it's kind of great because it builds up this sort of payoff that I think really tracks, as like, you're so excited for her when she finally gets the promotion, you know? But they had to lay all that groundwork for it to really pay off.
No, exactly. Like, I feel, as I'm 25, so kind of the same age as the characters in the show, and seeing Jane and Kat's success from season 1 when they were super young is so aspirational and exciting.
Yeah.
But Sutton's career path was a lot more realistic to, I feel like, a lot of what my friends and I were going through in the beginning, and like the assistant thing and yeah, what you were saying. Okay, guys, we're just going to probably talk about what went down. Okay, we're going to talk about tonight's episode starting now. So if you haven't seen it and you don't want to get spoiled, this is your warning. Okay, first we'll rewind a little. Let's talk about the big conversation with Richard in the living room. That acting, first of all, was so phenomenal. How did you prepare for that scene? And if people don't know what scene I'm talking about, hopefully, you know, you're not getting spoiled, but it's the scene where Richard and Sutton are discussing their thoughts and beliefs and futures when it comes to wanting children. So how did you prepare for that?
Well, that scene was actually really exciting because, you know, episodic television, like, you don't really get to shoot very many scenes. The scene that Sam and I did, it was 7 pages. And that's kind of really rare for TV. And what was even cooler about it is they let us shoot it all straight through. So we actually kind of rehearsed it and blocked it beforehand as if it were like a piece of theater, like a play, like a scene. And we had rehearsal with the director, and we kind of like had all we weren't able to be on the set. So we used like a rehearsal space that we had in the studio where we shoot, and we taped out all the furniture onto the floor and stuff like that. And we just kind of walked through it so that on the day when we got there with the crew, we could save a bunch of time. And we kind of just did the entire scene from beginning to end over and over and over again as they got it from different angles and stuff. So it was definitely one of the more intense days that I've ever had on set. But it was so cool. Like, the whole structure of the episode, everybody's story, Kat's story, Jane's story, Jacqueline's story, the whole structure of the episode is completely different than anything we've ever done on The Bold Type. So we were all kind of like, wow, this is so cool. You know, there's like starts, and then the episode starts, and then you get to where the episode started and you go back, and it kind of goes back and forth, which was really kind of awesome that they broke the mold during the 4th season. I also think that's kind of rare. So it was really a cool experience for sure.
I know it was, my mind kept changing over what Sutton and Richard's fate was going to be as it was playing through. And, you know, at first you think that Kat and Jane are ignoring their phone calls from you know, to like, you know, Kat's with Ava and, you know, they're busy, and you think that they're ignoring it. And then it cuts to the end and you see them pick up. And I think for a moment I was like, oh, this will be good. This will be good. And the scene of Richard and the suitcase leaving.
So, yeah.
I'm not even trying to be like dramatic, you know, for this, but it was fully gutting. Why can't Richard and Sutton just have something good?
I know. Well, it's really hard. I think that's why it was such a cool story to tell, because it's like, it's not about how much they love each other. It's just about them fundamentally having different ideas of what their life long term looks like. And so to see two people who otherwise don't really have any problems break up because of something like that, it's really painful. And then, of course, in the context of like real life, it was really sad for us because I've been working with Sam since the pilot, and it's kind of like, okay, well, what's going to happen now? So it feels very sort of, it kind of hits close to home in that sense of like, I was sort of also saying goodbye to a buddy of mine who had been such a huge part of my experience on the show. But
No, were you surprised that it took that turn for Sutton and Richard?
I was super surprised. I mean, they told me we were getting married, and I was like, well, that seems fast, but also so fun. And then when I found out what happened in the next 5 episodes, I was like, all of that's going to happen in 5 episodes? That seems crazy. But they did a really good job with navigating that, and they kind of made all of it fit into this little puzzle. And that's why I'm not a writer. But yeah, I was definitely really surprised. For sure.
It was so shocking for me as a viewer as well. And I'm wondering, you're in Sam, and everyone, Sam plays Richard. Did you guys have any, conversations on set, or you with the other girls, about stuff like this, like about relationships ending not because of a lack of love, but just because of like different fundamental life choices, like wanting kids or not, or living in San Francisco or living in New York?
You mean, did we talk about it on set, like as it applies to our personal lives?
Yeah, like what kind of conversation did this spark amongst you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a grown-up conversation, right? Like, I think you get to a point as an adult or like a young adult where you're like, oh, sometimes loving someone isn't enough. Sometimes relationships are harder than that. And I think that was a lesson that we were all kind of grappling with while we were shooting it, because it's not something that you're confronted with all the time, and especially not in a show like ours. So yeah, I think that's why it was such a unique story to tell, but it definitely makes it even more heartbreaking because it's a couple that you've rooted for so long, and they finally get married, and you're like, yes, they did it, and then it's just like,
It was so devastating. I'm also wondering, earlier, Sutton goes through a miscarriage, which I feel like was so cool of the Bold Type to talk about on TV and how that emotionally affects people. How did you prepare to deal with that storyline?
I know that it was a very personal storyline for a couple of people, I think, in the room. And I think everybody knows someone who's experienced that. That's the thing about it. It's so common and it's so underspoken about, if that's a word.
It is.
It's
It
it's
works.
it's a little bit of like a taboo thing. Like people don't know how to talk about it, and it makes them feel uncomfortable. And so for us to be able to talk about that too is kind of exciting, because I think that's one of the things that the show excels in, actually, is sort of creating a platform for a conversation about a topic that is difficult. And we've been doing that sort of since the beginning of the show. So it was cool because I think Sutton's journey and her storyline has always been very, I mean, obviously the three girls have very different storylines, but it was really, this is definitely the heaviest hand, I think, that they gave Sutton. And it was really, really fun to explore that. It felt really new and great. And also having a scene partner like Sam, who's so awesome and supportive and incredible, was like, made it that much better.
Have you received any feedback from fans about covering stuff like miscarriage this season yet?
It's tough for me. I'm not on Twitter really, so
Okay.
I feel like that's the forum where it's like easier to kind of like in real time see how people are feeling about stuff. But I have been contacted by some people who are like, I'm so happy that they made this a part of the story. So yeah, for sure.
It's so cool. Everyone, I have to look down at my notes because my phone is being used to record. So we're going a little analog. Um, but also kind of going back to Sutton and Richard's conversation, I felt myself while you guys were arguing, as your characters obviously, like wanting to butt in, you know, when they were going back and forth about who had given up what. And it was so interesting to see those like dual perspectives. Um, are you fully invested in Sutton's side and experience? Like when Richard was saying how he's always the one adjusting, and I was like, no, Sutton let you go to San Francisco. Like there's also been a push and pull. So what is your thoughts kind of like on their relationship from the outside view? Or are you so connected with Sutton that you just side with her always?
No, because, and I think that's what made that scene so special. And our showrunner, Wendy, wrote that scene, and she's so crazy talented. And Sam and I both agreed, we were like, this is an incredible scene because both of them have such strong arguments. Like, the reason that I loved it is because you didn't leave that scene being like, one of them is wrong and the other one isn't. It was sort of like, well, these are both super honest, legitimate stances for them to be taking, and that's why it's so hard. It's like nobody's wrong. And I do think that you don't see Sutton and Richard having conflict that much. So for them to have this epic sort of scene that is, you know, thick with conflict was also kind of exciting for the two of us to get to play.
How did you guys unwind after that scene? Were you able to just like snap back to real life, or did it take an emotional
No, it
toll?
was like very sad. It was very sad. And we had been doing it for so long, and it was like one of Sam's last days on set too. And that was really sad. So it was super emotional. I think we probably drank a bunch of wine after, but I don't even totally remember. But I think we probably did that with like the writers who were there and our director and stuff like that. We all like everybody on set was like, so should we go get a drink?
Like we need to come
Just
down
to like
from
remember
this.
that things are fine. Yeah.
Right. So Sam is not coming back.
Well, I'm not gonna say that. We don't even know if we're coming back.
Right. True.
So I have no answers for anybody on that front. But of course, in my dream scenario, we do come back and we do see Sutton and Richard again.
I know. I think especially with like the rawness and intensity that quarantine and COVID and the state of everything is like that. And you, like you said, it was 7 pages long, the scene. And it was it kept going and going, but it didn't feel like it was dragging. And it felt like you guys did it so effortlessly, like in one take. Do you remember how many takes it took you guys to shoot?
It was a bunch of takes because they have to move the cameras all around and get different angles and sizes and all of that kind of stuff. So we were doing that for hours. Yeah.
That's like really, already.
Yeah, but it was
it.
cool. Like I kind of loved it because like you know, I love theater. That was kind of where I got my start, and so it felt a little bit like that, you know. It's kind of rare in TV, I feel like, to do one thing like that many times, and so to be able, like, each time it was different and we found new things, so it was cool. It was tiring, but it was definitely a really rewarding day on set for sure.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And I also kind of want to talk about the scene where Richard and Jacqueline are discussing everything, and Jacqueline even asks, you know, is she sure? She's so young. And I feel like so many times when people are talking about young women and their decisions about children in the future, they think that they'll change their minds, you know, just because they're young and whatever. And I was just kind of wondering your thoughts on that, and how like even older people can kind of forget that and be like, oh, she might just change her mind. She's younger. And when a young woman like Sutton, who really knows what she wants, says it, I feel like she means it.
Yeah, I mean, I think she does mean it. Now, I think beyond that for Sutton, I think there are a lot of reasons why that might be true for her, and I don't totally feel like she has explored all of that within herself. And maybe she'll do that and not change her mind, or maybe she will do that and then she will change her mind. I just think it's a tricky situation for her to be in, because Richard's basically coming to her saying, I don't have all the time in the world, and this is a deal breaker for me. And I think that can feel like a huge responsibility in a relationship, you know, when you love someone so much and you want them to have everything that they want, and you also don't want to compromise what you want. So, but I do hear you. I think that, yeah, I think the conversation is changing a little bit. I feel like it's way more reasonable now for someone to be like, I don't plan on having kids. And now the question is like, do you want kids, instead of when are you having kids?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I think that's incredible, because everyone is entitled to how they feel about how they want to live their life. And I'm so excited that it's less of an expectation now, and that people feel like they have more time and they don't have to have kids, you know, when they're 20 or 25 or before they're 30. Like I love that there's so much more space now for people to kind of create the life that they want without feeling judged for that.
Wow. Yeah. It's like, how are couples, you know, kind of supposed to navigate these big life decisions when it's just, there's nothing to do with them. It's a different choice. Again, that's why I think it's just so devastating, but it makes so much sense. Do you think that both Sutton and Richard made the right decisions for them?
I think so, because I think that in the moment that they made the choice was their truth. And so I think that can't be wrong. Doesn't mean you can't change your mind, but speaking your truth is really hard, and they both did that. So I think it was right.
It was like, again, when I saw the scene of those suitcase wheeling, I was like watching alone
The
in my
suitcase
bed,
wheeling, I know.
and I literally went, I was like, and I don't know, like it was a 50-50 chance of what was going to happen, but it was just such a gut punch.
Yeah.
I'm like still just like reeling, I think. And I know the irony is, you know, we're obviously talking about your character's arc, and there's this whole thing about, you know, kids and a miscarriage. So clearly that's kind of what our conversation is about in discussing last night's episode. But I feel like a lot of women are asked, not only in press, but like by their family members when they're expecting to have children, and men kind of get different questions about their lives, ones that are focused about their careers or other things. So kind of what are your thoughts on that? And is that changing?
I think we've got a long way to go on that front. I think that there's definitely more pressure on women, given that most of the conversation that we're fed is about our biological clock and how we're running out of time, and how after the age of 30, your eggs become geriatric and you should freeze them and it's very expensive. And, you know, it's a lot of pressure. And I think it's too much pressure. Obviously, it's different for men, right? Because timing is seemingly less important, which is probably why they don't get those questions, which was what I thought was so cool about the episode, last week's episode, where Sutton's like, why don't you freeze your sperm? Like, did you know that older sperm can have the same effect as older eggs?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that when we were
Me either. I had no idea.
Yeah, I had no idea, but it's true. And so I think that's such an interesting piece of information. It's like, well, why aren't we talking about that? You know? So I do think we've got a long way to go on that front.
Yeah, and also I just saw someone comment how the scene of you crying and calling Kat and Jane after Richard leaves, how did you also prepare for that emotion? Like, that crying was so raw, so strong. Like, we've all had that sort of hyperventilating, ugly cry. So like, how did you even prepare for that?
Oh man, I don't even really remember. I'm not sure. I must have just been listening to really sad music or something. I don't know. It's also like it's like weird. You're in a bed on set, and so you feel like it does. I just look behind me because there's like a bunk bed behind me. I'm like
Right.
in a rental home right now. Anyway, when you're sort of in the environment, it does do something to you, where it does connect you to like a moment that you've really had in your life where you were in your bed and you felt that way. So the more realistic the environment is, the easier it is to connect, I think, to that emotion. But we had a great director who gave me a lot of space, and was really lovely and definitely created a comfortable enough environment for me to kind of go there. Yeah.
And I guess that's just acting, which is your job, and you're obviously very good at it. So like, it felt so real. The scene before when Richard and Sutton were having sex, it was, again, as a viewer, I wasn't sure if this was reconciliation or if this was a goodbye. How in that scene I thought was not like, I thought it was a little more real and adult than a lot of the other scenes that we've seen on The Bold Type. And I was wondering, like, did you guys have an intimacy coordinator on set, and like how did you guys navigate that scene, because it was also like so beautiful and painful, and I don't know, it was just really emotional in a way that contrasts a lot of the fun, raunchy,
Yeah.
graphic like sex that we see on The Bold Type.
Yeah. And definitely rare, I think, for Sutton and Richard too. But I'm so happy to hear that that's how the scene read to you, because that was how it was written in the script. You weren't supposed to know if it was makeup or breakup sex. We did have an intimacy coordinator on set. We've had her for the whole season 4, and she's incredible. She's like one of the first intimacy coordinators. Still like a very small number of people that do that. Her name is Amanda, and she travels all over the world, but is based in Canada. And we were so grateful to have her there, because those kinds of situations can be so uncomfortable and hard to navigate. And she made the whole thing so simple and easy for us. And I'm so fascinated by that job. I was just asking her questions like all day, because intimacy is so much more than just physical intimacy. Like, intimacy is something where, like, she'll come on set if it's like a scene where a young child is being abused or like pushed off of, like, something physical is happening. Like, she's there to kind of emotionally coach the child through that experience and give them tools to like be able to separate themselves from what they're doing. Like, it's
Wow.
so interesting. So yes, she was there. She's amazing. And it's so crazy to me that that wasn't a requirement until really recently, to have an intimacy coordinator on set for those kinds of things. I can't imagine ever doing anything like that without someone like Amanda, who we had. It's just one of those moments where you're like, I can't believe it wasn't always like this. How are we doing
Right.
this for so long without this person?
Especially, yeah, like you said, it's such a good point. It's more than just the physical. It's more than just like perhaps a nude scene or a sex scene or an abuse scene. It's like there's so much emotionally going into that too, and to like get into
Totally.
that mindset that it seems so ridiculous that this wasn't the norm.
Yeah.
And if people who are watching don't know, the intimacy coordinator is kind of a new thing that's going on a lot of sets, where someone is there to guide basically like all the physical and, like Meghann said, like actually physical, not
Emotional,
just,
yeah.
yeah, emotional, and it's really cool. A little lighter note, how do you think Sutton and Richard would be handling quarantine together if the whole split didn't happen?
I think they'd be killing it. That apartment is so sick. Richard's a great cook. I think Sutton would be like sewing masks, and they'd be drinking wine and, like, eating food.
She would so be sewing masks. I love
Yeah.
that. And she would have the girls over. They'd be in the bathtub. It would be like a whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, Also, another big storyline, obviously not about Sutton, but Kat's burgeoning relationship with Ava. And for those of you, I mean, I'm assuming everyone who's here right now is a fan and has caught up, but Ava is, making sure my dog doesn't freak out. Ava is she's conservative. She was the magazine owner's daughter, and her and Kat kind of met at the Bell, the women's club, and had a lot of opposing views. So kind of, what were your thoughts on that storyline?
Well, it's interesting, and I will say that we didn't get to finish telling that story because COVID and everything happened. We had to stop shooting 2 episodes early. So I think that story has gotten a lot of fan reaction, and and I get it. We all totally get it. But we didn't really get to finish. So that's kind of tough. They had to kind of make the best out of what they had. But you know, it makes me think of like the story in season 2 or 3 maybe, where Sutton has a gun and Jane finds out, and it's controversial and it's super super. I mean, it's not the same. Obviously, the Cat Ava story is like completely different, but just in terms of, I think what the show always wants to try to do is not make judgments about people, and have conversations and show a character who is capable of, you know, seeing a bigger picture or getting to know somebody or learning about a point of view that might not be their own, without sort of, you know, forcing anything on anybody. But yeah, you know, yeah.
When are we going to see the 2 episodes that didn't make it?
Hopefully someday.
So how it's filmed, like tonight's episode and next week's, which is the finale, did they frame it so it's like going to be a finale, or will it feel a little open-ended? Or I guess all finales kind of are open-ended in a way, you know what I mean?
A little bit of both. Yeah, I think a lot of shows are kind of experiencing that because of, you know, obviously the pandemic and stuff. But I think it'll feel like a finale for the most part. But yeah, definitely you'll be left wondering what's going to happen.
And how are you doing in quarantine? How have you been spending your time and connecting with people and making sure you're not totally going crazy in this?
I mean, I'm totally going crazy. I think at first it was like, oh, I'm gonna think of shit that I can do to make myself feel useful and create a routine for myself, and then all of that kind of goes out the window. It's really tough. I feel like I've been talking to my friends a lot. The last month, I think, has been super hard on everybody. There's so much going on, and it's really an overwhelming time. So I think the biggest thing that I try to do is just not judge myself for feeling like a complete waste of space. And you know, I think that's where you suffer the most, is feeling like, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, you know. So I try not to do that.
I know, it's crazy that it started. I think I started first working from home like March 7th, and it's mid-July and we're still here.
I know. It's crazy.
And obviously all of us, including myself and people who are tuning in, we're probably, you know, watching the Bold Type. That's what we're watching. But what have you been watching or binging, if anything, during this? What's your favorite thing right now?
Oh man. You know what's crazy? I haven't been watching a lot of TV recently. I think the last show I finished was Normal People on Hulu.
That's Sutton Richard level intensity.
Yeah. I mean, I loved that book. I love both of Sally Rooney's books. But I think that's the last show I watched. I just watched Jurassic Park the other night for the first time, which is kind of insane, to admit that I had never seen it. But yeah.
I see a fan question that says, is this the most amount of time you've spent away from Katie and Aisha? Is it? Is this the most amount of time you guys have spent away from each other since starting the Bold Type?
Oh my God, Kayla. It is actually, but Aisha and I are both in LA, so we have socially distanced hangs sometimes. But it's definitely the longest I think I've gone without seeing Katie since we started shooting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's so crazy. I know everyone is saying how,
that Jeff Goldblum is a stud. He's a
stud. I actually saw Jurassic Park for the first time too the other night. My boyfriend was like, "You haven't seen this?" And I was like, "I guess we have the time now. Like, turn it on." I know, but everyone like this. I cannot wait. Can you give us any hints or sneak peeks about the finale? I know you probably can't, but we have to ask.
Oh man. There is a really cute moment in the finale. Campbell, I do miss my New York friends in LA. It's true. There's a really cute moment in the finale where Kat and Jane are trying to get Sutton sort of back on her feet. And I love that scene. That's like one of my favorite scenes.
I know, I think it's so, and I obviously in the Bold Type we talk about I'm on it. They talk about relationships and love and jobs and everything, but I think what's so great about it is it explores friendship in a way that we don't often get to see in media. You know, like there's not really books or on self-help for friend conflict, or like it's not a common thing to be able to discuss like friend grieving over things with friends. And I think it's created this space where women are able to connect. And I'm wondering how that's affected like your own friendships and how you evaluate them and like go through them and lean on them.
I mean, for us, the relationship that you see on screen is like pretty true to real life, you know. I was like 2 minutes late for this because I was FaceTiming Katie and Aisha, and I was like, oh shit, I gotta go. Yeah, we got really lucky. I don't think it happens like that all the time, but from what I gather, talking to people, that's their favorite thing about the show is that they feel like the conflict never really exists between the three girls, you know?
Right. And
Right.
what do you have? I know everything's kind of been paused and halted, but do you have anything exciting coming up next?
Well, I'm learning to golf, which is very exciting. As far as projects go, no, I have nothing coming up. I'm working on a script with one of my best friends, but that's gonna be not happening for a very long time because it has lots of old people in it. So, but yeah, I'm learning to golf, loving that. And
You're writing, learning to
otherwise,
golf.
just trying to get through the day.
I feel that. Well, thank you so much for coming by. I think
pleasure.
I might go rewatch it again and weep. And until next week's finale, I know everyone's saying I still can't believe. Yeah, we know it was really intense. I'm still processing. Stop reminding me. But yeah, well, thank you so much. And
Thank you so
we
much.
all probably look forward to this next week. And if you're just coming in late, this will be saved and on the Variety Instagram in full, so you can check it out. And hopefully we get a season 5.
Fingers crossed, baby.
Fingers crossed. Well, anyways, we'll see you around. Thank you so much, Meghann.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.